All right, today we're going to talk about a Java web framework that pretty much flips the entire script on how we build UIs. It's called WFWeb, which stands for Web Framework. And let me tell you, it's got a pretty radical server-first philosophy that we're going to unpack right now.
So let me ask you something. Imagine your next project is building the user interface for a bank. Or maybe it's a real-time trading platform where every single millisecond counts. The demands are just intense. You need ironclad security, you need blistering speed, and it has to be absolutely reliable. How do you even begin to tackle that?
Well, the folks behind WFFWeb have a very specific answer to that question. They built this framework for exactly those kinds of high-stakes scenarios. This is not your go-to framework for a simple block. No way. This thing is purpose-built from the ground up for mission-critical apps where security and real-time data are everything.
And here's the core idea, the thing that makes it so different. What if you could just toss out most of the client-side complexity we're all used to? What if you could control the entire UI directly from your Java backend, almost like you were building an old-school desktop app with something like Java Swing? That's the fundamental question WFFWeb is asking.
So yeah, let's dive into this philosophy. It's a server-first approach that really challenges what everyone else is doing in front-end development today.
Okay, so how does this actually work in practice? It's pretty wild. All your UI logic, and I'm talking clicks, state changes, all of it, lives on the server. In Java, you don't write separate HTML files. Nope. Instead, you build your UI with Java objects that represent HTML tags. They call it object-oriented HTML. So the browser, it basically just becomes a thin client, a simple display that just renders whatever the server tells it to over a super fast WebSocket connection.
Now, to really get a handle on this shift, let's compare it to something we all know, the classic Model View Controller, or MVC pattern.
And this comparison makes the difference crystal clear. With MVC, you know the drill. You're always writing that glue code to connect the model, the view, and the controller. You're setting up APIs, making AJAX calls. WFFWeb says forget all that. It introduces a new pattern, MLTP. All you, the developer, have to worry about the data model and what they call the logical template, which is just your UI defined in Java. The framework itself handles the push part, automatically syncing any changes to the browser.
So long story short, you code as if you're building a desktop app, and the framework takes care of all the messy web complexity for you. Simple as that. Okay, so when you have this level of server-side control, you unlock some seriously powerful capabilities. The server isn't just a data provider anymore. Think of it more like a puppeteer, directly pulling the strings of the UI in real time. Let's check out a couple of its superpowers. First up, superpower number 1. There's this feature called shared tag content, and its goal is so simple, but man, is it powerful. It lets you update a whole bunch of different elements across your UI, all from one single spot in your server code. And the process is incredibly easy. You just create one object on the server, let's say it's holding a stock price. Then you can have a bunch of different UI elements, spans, divs, whatever, subscribe to that object. Now when you update that single object on the server, bam! The framework instantly zaps that new value out to every single element that's subscribed. That is pure reactivity, but it's all controlled from the backend. All right, superpower number 2 comes from a class called Tag Repository. Now get this. This gives your server-side Java code the power to literally reach into the user's browser, find any element on the page, and manipulate it directly. Seriously, think of it like a server-side document.getElementById, but on steroids. Right, from your Java logic, you can query the live DOM in the browser, find a specific div, change its style, add new elements to it, or, and this is really cool, attach any data you want directly to it. So, for instance, you could have a big, complex Java object living on your server. And with just one command, upsert, you can basically staple that entire object right onto a live tag that's sitting in the user's browser. And here's the magic part. The framework handles all the communication. That data just appears. It's immediately available on the client-side DOM element under a special property. You didn't have to build an API endpoint, you didn't have to mess with serializing JSON, the server just put the data there and now the client can use it. How cool is that?
Now I know what you might be thinking. A server-driven UI? That sounds kind of old school, right? Well, hold on. WFFWeb is built from the ground up with modern performance and security in mind. Let me show you what I mean.
So why is it so fast? 2 big reasons. First, since the UI is generated by Java code, there are no template files to read from a disk, which is a huge performance win. Second, it uses WebSockets for everything, so you get rid of all that constant HTTP request overhead.
And on the security side? Well, when all your important business logic is kept safe on the server, there's just way less for an attacker to poke at on the client side. Plus, using secure WebSockets keeps that communication channel locked down tight.
And this is not some dusty old framework. It's actively evolving. If you look at its release history, you can see a clear focus on making it rock solid, things like thread safety and reliability. Version 12 hit the scene in late 2023 as a big production-ready milestone, and they've already pushed out releases with even more features and big performance boosts.
And it's fully embracing all the cool modern Java stuff. It supports Java 21's virtual threads for handling massive numbers of users. You can compile it into a tiny, ultra-fast native image with GraalVM, and get this, it has built-in support for scaling across multiple servers without needing sticky sessions, which is a huge deal for scalability. Oh, and of course, it handles all the modern single-page app URL routing you'd expect right out of the box.
So, after all that, the million-dollar question is, does this radically different approach actually fit your project? Let's break down where it really makes sense. Look, this framework is an absolute beast for certain types of applications. High-security financial apps? Check. Real-time data dashboards? For sure. Complex, stateful business applications? Absolutely. If you're a Java team building a trading platform or a banking portal, you should really be looking at this. But if you're just building a simple marketing website, it's total overkill. And pretty obviously, if your team lives and breathes JavaScript, this isn't going to be the right tool for the job.
Which brings us to our final thought. In an era where we're all drowning in client-side complexity, frameworks on top of frameworks, WFFWeb comes along and asks a really provocative question. Could we solve our hardest, most complex UI problems by just moving the logic back to the server? It's a wild thought, but for the right kind of application, the answer might just be yes.